right. Well, for those that are going to see this later on, I'm not really sure what this is going to be called. We're just going to say it's called Tina's Quarantine Chats. Uh, and rightfully so, we start with Joanna, who we've known each other for quite a while, but this beautiful friendship has come afloat much later in knowing each other. It's actually funny. I was thinking about this the other day when I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to Joanna. And if anyone knows my mother, she has a strong Long Island accent. And she's like, oh, I remember Joanna on all those like websites growing up. She was so good as a da da da. So it's kind of funny to like know who you were from afar and now just be incredibly close friends. But yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know who Joanna is, she is from North Carolina. She played club soccer for Castle, was a touted recruit growing up. Everyone knew who Joanna was. National team, youth national team star. What is it? When did you, let's call it, commit to North Carolina? It had to have been
Eighth grade.
eighth grade. Yeah, that was the talk of the town, man.
I know.
Like, geez, I don't even know where I'm going to high school. And this kid,
I
like,
know. And who
so
thought I was
always was
older
going
than
to
I
be a
was?
Tar Heel.
Yeah.
Hometown girl from Raleigh. So really, honestly, you were on that high for a while.
Very much
and I know we
so.
talked about the other day in terms of how people can relate to you because your journey is kind of like this different beaten paths at different times. And obviously we'll get into it, but you know, you go to North Carolina, you do pretty well your first 2 years, you're playing a lot, and then just kind of plagued by injury. And honestly, a very rough way, 2 back-to-back ACLs. And then I think kind of like having that chip. I mean, I can imagine, again, we'll get into it, but just having gone through that, not even knowing when you're going to play again. And obviously you proved a lot of people wrong, getting drafted at Boston and then eventually making your way to getting a lot of playing time in Orlando this last year. So again, I just kind of wanted to tell people about your story and you tell it yourself, because I think there's a lot of young girls and older people and that can relate to kind of being on a high and then getting knocked down and just kind of having to weave your way through different situations. So yeah, I guess we'll start with your youth. Joanna was very much known for her image as well. If you ever met Joanna on a soccer field as a young kid, which I had a couple times in travel soccer.
Apologies for whatever happened, whatever I did. I don't know what I did.
You didn't do anything, but it was always funny because I couldn't miss you. No one could miss you like a sore thumb because you literally had this bun on your head. I was like, how does this girl keep a bun on her head like that? I mean, you'd had balls left and right, and this thing was like, boom.
Well, it's a funny story because, like, just with the bun, like, when I was growing up until kindergarten, like, I had my hair in a bob, and I had a bow, big bow, like, people call me Boanna. I had a huge bow on my head, and I never took it off. And so then at kindergarten, I finally told my mom, I was like, listen, I'm done with this. I'm letting my hair grow out. She's like, okay, great, cool. So from then on, like, my hair's never been short. And I have a lot of hair. So if I wore it in a ponytail, it will like break into like 2 or 3 like things, like ponytails like come to the side. So my mom actually started like putting it up in a bun for me. And did you ever do like indoors and like games? Like we had indoor nationals with Next Level. So we would go up to Maryland and we play these big tournaments. And before the final one time, like my hair wasn't tight and it was going to fall out and I knew it. And so my coach went around searching for my mom. It was like a 2-story like indoor facility. And like my mom like fixed it real tight for me and like we ended up winning. But it was like, I actually remember when I figured out how to do it myself. Cause it was like, my mom was like, honey, you're like old enough. Like you need to figure out like how to do your hair, like how you want it. And so I remember I was at my grandmother's house in Shelby, North Carolina, and I started fiddling with it, and I finally got it, and that sucker was tight. Didn't move.
Well, shout out to Wendy.
Yeah, shout out to Wendy.
But also, I guess, shout out to parents generally.
Yes.
I think for any young kid that watches this that's still in club soccer, still playing, generally, your parents honestly, when I look back and I'm like, the amount of games they drove me to, the amount of times they did my hair, the amount of times they bought me cleats and everything else, it's, you know, Those are the true.
That's a whole nother story.
Stamps.
I left my cleats in Burlington, and my parents like drove to Dick's and got me a pair of cleats, and I played that game.
Right.
They're the true
Talk
story.
about that a little bit. Like growing up, right? You kind of make a name for yourself rather young. You know, you're in middle school, you're doing really well, you're on a good club team. And I mean, when you put that into perspective, right? Like, I mean, 8th grade is, I mean, that's still not the norm. I mean, kids are getting recruited much younger now, but talk about that process of, you know, balancing kind of what maybe felt like pressure, but also, you know, you're still a young kid, you have school, you're playing a lot, you're getting called into a lot of youth camps. How did that kind of play out for you, and what can you take from that now?
So for me, I'm from Raleigh, and pretty much my whole club team, the majority was from Cary, about 30 minutes away, and we all did this indoor training kind of facility in program, Next Level Academy, that kind of raised all of us, that the core group of our club team came from. There was about 10, 11, 12 of us that stayed together since we were like 7, 8 until we were 18. And some of them went to college with me. So for me, I came in kind of as the Raleigh kid, and I was a year younger than all of those girls. And I wasn't as good as them because they'd been in the program maybe a year or so longer than me. And I feel like from the moment that I started playing, I always felt that like I was chasing them, and I was chasing your ex-teammate, Alexis Schaffer, Claire Wagner, Alexis Degler, Alexis Schaffer, Claire Wagner, these players that were older than me, a year older than me. And I always kind of felt that drive, and I wanted to be better than them. So I just outworked every person in every session every day of the week, and then went home and did extra because I wanted to be in that top group, and I wanted to be, you know, doing the demos. And so from a young age, that kind of drove me. And then I was then pulled up with them to then with the youth group, or the youth age group was called YTS, we had at Castle before everything kind of restructured. And then that's when I kind of started, you know, feeling not a part of them, but I was with that group and starting to develop into the player I was. I look back on it, and that's really like the only time that like I always felt like I was always trying to get a next step and a next level and a next, how do I outwork everyone? How do I become better at this? How do I become better at this? I remember watching YouTube videos of like Casey Nagara, UNC Tar Heel, juggling, her and Tobin. I'm like, okay, how does she juggle like that? And I like figured out how to juggle on my toes. So like I did a lot of like self-teaching and just hard work. I just loved soccer. I loved it, and I wanted to be the best.
So then what about, you know, and I think this is important to highlight, but you did very well academically throughout your career, not only in high school, but you did well at North Carolina. Being so passionate about soccer, you know, I think not that it came easy to you, but, you know, you loved it so much, you were willing to put in the time. But I also think like a lot of kids, it's stressful these days. You have a lot of work, and you're in school, and then you may have double training on a certain day. What advice would you give young kids right now that are, you know, loving and very passionate about their sport, but also recognizing that the academic piece is really important? And how did that play into, or how much of weight was that in your decision to go to North Carolina, and how much of importance was that for them to kind of let you in with your academics? Yeah,
so kind of the reason that I always wanted to do so well in school is that I wanted to be an all-around a great, you know, academically, athletically. I wanted to be great in everything that I do and still do. And so for me, if I wanted to stay after practice, I had to get my homework done. I wanted to stay after and work on free kicks. Or if I wanted to stay, I didn't want to have that pressure of like, I can't do what I want in the sport because of school. So for me, I would always I think the best advice I can give is utilize all of your school time that you're at school. There are plenty of times and minutes in the day that you're able to, you know, crank out that math homework, or, you know, crank out whatever you can do in those, you know, 10 minutes that you have that the teacher gives you, and kids are just talking and, you know, shooting the shit around, and like just where you can just pull out your textbook, kill 5 problems, and now you can stay after practice and work on your free kicks. That was kind of my mindset all through school. And I think for, advice for kids is that you don't want the academics to hold you back from your dream school. So if your dream school, for example, is UVA or UNC or Stanford or some of these great athletic schools, you've got to be able to make the cut academically as well. And I think that's most important, is don't let your academics hold back your athletics.
Absolutely.
And that's a really big concept, I think, that needs to be instilled at a young age.
So I think we can both relate to the fact that to get to that level and to play for some of those universities, it takes a lot of effort and time at a younger age. And you do have to sacrifice some of the social aspects of your life, as well as some of the fun that you look back on in high school that you missed out on. I guess part of my question too is how did you, and again, I can recall for myself, I wasn't always perfect at it. And there's definitely times where I made it way too stressful at such a young age. What kind of advice, looking back, do you have for people who are like, I'm passionate, I know I can get there, but this has become so routine and so regimented that I'm losing my love for it. Because I think we underestimate the importance of still loving your sport and having fun with it, and making sure you're not just saying, I want to go to North Carolina, that's the end all be all, and if that doesn't happen, I'm a failure. How would you, looking back at your old self, how would you have maybe navigated that, or what advice do you have in terms of maybe where it didn't go well, and now looking back you're like, I could have made these changes?
Yeah, I think that when you're growing up and you're developing, the drive has to come from within yourself rather than kind of exterior things. So like if your parents are putting you in all these extra things, and I think where I developed most was in the front yard of like, how do I create scenarios in my head that I can see in the game? So like me, for example, at my house, we have like a two-car garage. So there's like a panel in between the two garages. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's probably like a yard, maybe a yard and a half wide. And I'd stand on in my driveway and I'd take a touch and I right foot, how many times can I get out of 10, hit that spot? And that consistency is being able to create that in your head translates to the game rather than just being able to go through cones. And I think the ability to be able to create that is the exciting part of the game. So like being able to create certain things and be creative, that's what kind of kept me going, rather than, oh, I want to play at North Carolina, or I want to play EVA, or I want to play at Stanford.
Right.
That was what drove me. It was like, it was just so fun to like try to hit a certain square in the garage, and then my dad get mad and have to like fix it. But like being able to do those things was the most rewarding part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that puts a lot of perspective into your story, and that, I think a lot of people from afar would have said, wow, she committed, you had North Carolina at 8th grade. Why not just be like, all right, I'm going to chill now. Like, I got my school. And I know from my experience, there's a difference between getting into a university and being recruited by one, and then walking on campus and having to perform, and it not just be now, okay, I checked that box, what's next? So maybe let's transition a bit into your college career and talk a little bit about that. So obviously, as we said, you had a lot of success through club, and, I think you had a good relationship going to North Carolina. But again, if anyone plays soccer, they know the North Carolina Tar Heels and the history that goes there, and the quality of players that are generally there from year to year. So it's not a matter of, I got recruited, I'm going to automatically play if I go. So talk about kind of that entry process of being like, okay, I'm on the campus, I'm a freshman. How was that transition for you from club soccer off the bat, and what did you learn in that first year?
Yeah, so for me, Anson actually didn't know how old I was when he was recruiting me. So I technically, even though I was in 8th grade, he thought I was a sophomore. And to know Anson, it makes total sense because I love him, but he's like Einstein, he's scatterbrained. So we actually came to the decision that I would graduate high school in 3 years. because my entire life I'd always played up, and it would kind of, I didn't even think about it, but he's like, have you ever thought about graduating a full year early? And I was like, no, but like, that sounds great. Like, that's the age group that I, with national team, I was a young 95. I was in November. So pretty much all the girls were older than me.
Oh my gosh, you're still older than me?
Yeah. So all the girls, yeah.
Funny. Everybody's older than me in the 5 years. So, okay.
I know.
Good to know.
So everyone was way older than me, and I was like, you know what, like, what would I do once they all graduate? I never thought about that. So I ended up graduating a full year early and was coming in at 17. And, I was coming in as a freshman with Crystal Dunn and Talia Ojai and these huge names that they just came off of winning a national championship, and unbelievable players. And what I love about Anson is throughout, from the time that I committed and to the time that I got there until now, he's so honest. I could call him right now and he would pick up the phone. Like, he's a great communicator. And so I knew that, nothing was given to me. I knew I had to earn whatever I got. And I was going to try to go in and, start. But I mean, when you have Crystal Dunn in front of you, you've obviously got to look at another position. So yeah, it's a huge, huge learning experience. And I loved my freshman year. The seniors, the Crystals and the Ks, they were phenomenal to the freshmen. Anna Seeloff, those girls were phenomenal, welcoming us in. And, for me, I loved every second of it. That's what I wanted since I committed and since I was a little kid, watching Heyo play, watching Casey Naguera, watching Tobin play. So being able to be a part of that, I was just really soaking it all in. I got my 10 minutes. I would always get 10 to 12 minutes every half, subbing in for Crystal.
Since two lines, always.
Yeah. Glorious. But it was difficult. I mean, it wasn't easy to accept that, from my entire life, I started and played every game.
Right.
It was barely taken out. So then to go in and not start and play 90 minutes, I think that was a bit of a difficult swallow. But when it's Crystal Dunn, I mean,
right,
you can't complain.
Yeah. I mean, and not to backtrack, but I think you brought up a really good point in that, and I can speak from my own experience. When you get recruited at a really young age, especially now, right, these athletic departments have all these beautiful facilities and offerings, and I think it's difficult at times for young kids to not get caught up in the glitz and the glam.
Mm-hmm.
And being somebody that had transferred in her career, Steve is very similar to Anson in the sense that it's pretty straightforward. You're never guaranteed or promised anything. That was not always the case on my recruiting visits. I definitely had the red carpet pulled out at certain places and not at others. But talk about that in a little bit, just the importance of transparency and what you think young kids should recognize as they're going through the recruiting process, what aspects of it, the school, they should really consider, especially being someone, which we'll get into after that, who had gone through over a year and a half of injury, where you're more a student at North Carolina than you are a player during that time. I mean, you're rehabbing, but you're not as ingrained in the day-to-day. So
I think it's super important, some of the girls that I, have trained and talked to as they're kind of going through this process, the key is, where will you be happy if everything soccer related is going down the dump? And for me, I'm a homebody. I love my family. I love North Carolina. I'm a very Southern girl at heart. So for me, I have that comfortability, like that ability to feel at home there. And I think it's important that wherever you go, that you enjoy the academics, that you enjoy the campus, that you're able to, put your heart and soul in somewhere else. And I think that, as well as, the school and the fit and the soccer side on that sense, but it's super important that the academics, that it's going to challenge you, that you love the campus, that, whatever those outside soccer, those check marks, whatever they tick for you, I think that's really important that you look into that for sure.
So considering your story, I mean, up to now, right, we're talking about your success as a youth player. You're recruited really young. You go into North Carolina, coming off a national championship. I would say it's an accomplishment to have gotten as much playing time as you did as a freshman, and then
Mm-hmm.
really start to hit your speed in your second year. Had a great second year in North Carolina, and then, get plagued with an ACL in your spring
Mm-hmm.
season. And not to do a spoiler alert, but Joanna actually tore her ACL twice before. So you tore it the second time, and was it a few weeks prior to being cleared, or you had just been cleared from your first?
So I tore so sophomore year, healthy, and then junior year, our team had 7 ACL tears. So I tore my ACL going into the NCAA tournament right after we lost to FSU in the semis of the ACC tournament. So it was that practice on that Sunday. So we played FSU Friday, practice Sunday, tore it then. And then that was November, and then came back in August and tore my other one. So within eight months maybe. So I was planning on redshirting. I'd already been contemplating that of, I wasn't going to be, I'd be getting minutes here and there, and I didn't want that to be my senior season.
Right.
So I was going to redshirt and then play my next year, but I wasn't expecting to recover from another ACL to then go into my
so let's dive into that, because I think that's definitely not a norm. At least not my experience. I know a lot of people that have torn their ACL. So for one, obviously incredibly devastating to have torn it prior to being in the NCAA tournament. You're right in the thick of the season, most exciting part of the season. So,
and we were number 1 in the country that junior year.
Right.
We were moving, we were rolling, and then the ACLs just started going on our team. And we ended up, that NCAA, we lost in the second round. So we went from number 1 in the country to losing in the second round of the tournament to Texas A&M at Clemson. We didn't even host.
Right. So let's talk about maybe we'll take it in 2 parts. We'll talk about your first ACL. Because I would say, there's no question that up to that point you knew the importance of hard work. I'm sure there was many mental challenges that went into, playing time and things of that such. But in terms of really having your first major hurdle, that seems to be an outlier in your career. Talk about kind of first how you worked through that first phase, so recovering from it, and then kind of building up that, excitement, like I've put in the time, I've put in the work, and then obviously just having a devastating blow and being like, okay, what is going to be 8 months is now 16 months of recovery. Just kind of walk us through how that went for you, and what are your big takeaways for anybody that may be going through injury right now or has gone through it and, can relate.
So for us, we had 4 girls that tore it around 3 weeks of each other. And so we were all kind of grouped together in our rehab. And initially that can be okay, but, I trusted the people around me, and ended up, the 4 people that tore their ACL were way different body types. Way different body types. And so I didn't recover as well as I thought I was recovering, if that makes sense. So
it's also hard not to compare yourself. I recognize that.
Say again?
It's hard not to compare yourself to people's journeys and recovery.
It is.
You're like, I just want to be back. So,
and the things that caused my tear were not really addressed or fixed, I would say, when I was going through the first process. And, I followed that.
A little more, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, for me, I was never really able to activate my glutes. I was never really able to get into positions where I could activate my glutes. So I still am, but I was super quad dominant. And my quads would immediately take over in certain exercises where it really should be the hamstrings and the glutes taking over. So when I would be going through these, exercises, if I'm doing a glute bridge, I wouldn't be able to rotate my pelvis. So then I could activate my glutes and my hamstrings. My quads would just do it. And so those small things. And then once you start adding, squats and hex bars, if I can't do a glute bridge right, I'm definitely not doing those right. So came back, and followed that standard, you know, this, and this is when you run, this is when you do such and such. So I followed that, you know, trusted in that. And I actually ended up having a ton of scar tissue in that knee, and I was actually in a lot of pain. But I was cleared to, you know, I started easing back in training. Things felt good. I felt decent. And I remember it was preseason. I finally was feeling good. I pinged a ball out wide, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to take this player on. I do a scissor, and as I scissor, I was going to roll it. On my scissor, my knee went in, and I immediately knew. It cracked. The boys' field heard it. Like, for some reason, my ACLs sound like a gunshot. Like, gosh. Some people, like, don't really make too much of a noise, but mine, like, were loud. Yeah. Pretty much everyone heard it. I knew immediately. And for me, kind of going back to the first process and how I kind of explain it is the fact that I didn't really accept that it was torn. Like, I didn't fully, like, I was never fully okay with it. And I was like in denial. Right. Even when I tore it the first time, I was like, brace me up, play me into, like, just like, yeah. I look back, I was like, no, that's never going to happen. Things that, like, you know, I didn't come to terms with it. And that also was a part of it. And so once that second one hit, thank goodness my parents lived 30 minutes away. I called my mom because my dad was at work, and she immediately came. I mean, because I knew. And we kind of set this goal that, you know, I would be back. I dropped my business major because I hated it. Dropped my business major, and from then on, like, I got in somehow with Chris Gores, trainer Gores, on social media. He's been an angel in my life, and the way I actually, you know, able to get in touch with him was through Yael Averbush, who played at UNC, and so she would play pickup all the time when I was a youngster coming along in Raleigh, and she'd always invite me to pickup games. So we had kind of a relationship then, her post UNC and me pre UNC. Right. And she played in Washington, where Chris kind of started doing, making a name for himself in the personal training. And he doesn't even call himself a personal trainer. It's like he's just like Chris. Yeah. And so I really liked what he did on social media. And so I was like, I talked to my mom, and she's like, you know, honey, just reach out to Yael, see if he'll, like, you know, talk to you or whatever, because he's up in DC. And so I immediately reached out to Yael. She's like, let me, you know, he wants to FaceTime you, so go ahead, and y'all, like, I'm connecting y'all. And from then on, after the conversation, he was like, you should, you know, you are an individual. You should be treated as an individual. After leaving that phone call and finding out that where he was located was 5 minutes from my mom's best friend's daughter, who are like family with us, that I'd be able to stay. And so immediately hung up that call and, like, started crying, because I knew, like, I was in good hands at that point, because I knew, you know, if it was a soccer drill, I'd be able to create it in my head. I'd be able to, you know, fix the problem. But, like, I don't know how to fix my glute problem. Like, I don't know how to activate I couldn't figure it out. And I needed someone's help. And he was phenomenal. And so from then on, I had class on Tuesday and Thursday only, but I had 3. And so I had Monday, Wednesday, Friday off, because I dropped all my business classes. And every month I would drive up to DC with my mom, which was about 5 hours, spend 4 days there training, you know, working with him. He'd give me a plan, and I'd just keep that process going. And yeah, it was hard. It was very hard, exhausting, but it was the most rewarding experience I've ever had.
I think you bring up a really good point too about, you know, I always say about being an athlete, there's so much value that comes out of the hard work and the structure and knowing how to kind of grind through a lot of things at once. But I also think at times too, when you're taught so much about being resilient, it can be difficult to humble yourself and say, hey mom, hey coach, you know, I need help. And I find that I didn't even know that about, we're so close. I didn't even know that aspect of your story. And I think it makes a good point for all people that are going through injury that, one, you have to go at your own pace, but 2, you have to be willing to let people in to kind of help you. And I think that can be challenging in any aspect of life, but especially when a lot of things are out of your control and your journey may be 2 months longer than someone else's or quicker. And
I think the most important thing that I learned is that you have control of your rehab. You have control of the people who are going to help you. You're the one who has that control. So it may not be easy, and it may not be, I had to drive 5 hours and I had to, not work with, the UNC side, but like you know yourself well enough that you know what's best for you and your family knows what's best for you. And you want to surround yourself with those people during a rehab process. And, God bless my mom driving all those hours and helping me. And God, honestly, Chris is straight up an angel. And he knows this, I always tell him, but like, I would not be playing, or I'm not playing anymore, but I would not have continued my career if it wasn't for him. And yeah, he always says, I'm just doing my job. I'm like, you're incredible. Like, you're the best. But and Anson was absolutely phenomenal in letting me kind of dictate my own rehab. And I think that came from the trust that he saw in me the first 3 years of how hard I worked and how, I did all the little things right. And he let me pretty much do me based off of my history of how hard I work and how much I care about the game.
Right. So obviously, it was great that you got through that and you had a great senior season for yourself, and were able to utilize these people to help you. So now when you look back at it in terms of like transitioning into playing professionally and making that choice, but also just going through that situation, like what did you take out of that? And also, I know we've talked about it, but obviously I would say at this point, you're one of those people that's really good about being in tune with your body. And I think that's a big struggle for a lot of athletes, is like knowing when to pull back. We're oftentimes so much overtrained because our capacities are so wide. What advice do you have now about kids that, you want to put the work in and it's important to be dedicated, but you also want to be sure that you're not overdoing it to the point where you are prone to injury or you're not being effective in your training because you're so tired from never taking a rest? Can you talk a little bit about like how that maybe brought you back to kind of learning more about your body and what you need, not what anyone else needs, but what you need as you move forward in your career?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I knew up until my injuries began, like I was staying after shooting, free kicks, fitness, all that stuff. But, once you have 2 major surgeries on your knees and you're coming back and you just are trying to stay healthy, that may not be the best decision. And I really had to be like, okay, like my knee is sore today. I cannot do anything extra. Or like, I am feeling good. I can do extra. It's not based on what you want in your heart. You have to listen to how you feel physically. And that was a learning curve, but I don't think it was as hard for me because I was out of the game so long. I wouldn't want to do anything that would jeopardize me not, having the opportunity to play every single day. So if it required me to not do extra sessions or not do that extra fitness that I normally would have for 14 years of my life, if that was the case, then, I was willing to accept that so then I could continue to play and train and put everything I had in the training session. So I think because I was out for, I was too scared to jeopardize my ability to play.
Right. So, you go through North Carolina your senior year, you do well, you get drafted to Boston, Boston folds, which is a transition. And then you end up, being reallocated to Chicago. And I'll let you speak to your Chicago experience. I think overall you enjoyed being in Chicago, but again, faced with the adversity of, putting a lot of time and effort in, not really playing, not really, now it's your career, you're not really earning a lot, as many of us know, but the soccer industry is not necessarily super lucrative for players. Talk about that facing another adversity, right? You've faced multiple months of injury and going through that. And what made you not just say, you know what, forget this, I'm over it. Like, I'm just going to move on. I went to UNC. Like, what in your mind made you persevere through, again, being in a period where you're not playing, you're not getting that time, but you're still putting in the work, you're still adding value to a team that you're not necessarily showing minutes, but your value's there in another sense. So talk about that experience.
So I come in, obviously not originally drafted by Chicago, drafted by Boston. And so that was kind of, no one knew, that was uncharted waters for everyone. And so the way that worked was whoever drafted, say, for example, Rosie White was Chicago drafted her from Boston. They picked up her contract. I didn't even have time to make the roster for Boston, but they had my rights. So Chicago technically drafted my rights. So the way that worked was sign me or not sign me. They had my rights in the NWSL the whole entire year.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not like I could have just picked up and gone to Orlando that year or picked up and gone to another team. Chicago owned my rights. And so I couldn't go anywhere, even though they didn't sign me. They only had I think they didn't have a lot of, their roster is pretty packed, if I can remember. They signed Emily, one of my best friends from, she's a goalkeeper. They signed her, and I think that was all the rookies. So it was tough. I mean, going through that process, but, I was still, let's see, August, September, April. I mean, I was maybe 8 months out of my, coming back.
Right.
So at that time, I was still just I was just so happy to be playing again and so happy to be out there that, granted it was so difficult, watching the games and not traveling and that part. But for me, I had the most amazing host family that I could ever, we still text my host dad all the time. I talk to them weekly. They all came to my wedding. I love them with all of my heart. Like, I would do anything for them. They do. So the blessings that came out of Chicago are incredible. I met one of my best friends. I met, so many close friends in that team was phenomenal. I loved practices. I loved being a part of, everything that they did. And for me, I think, because I was playing and I was practicing and I was doing so well at practice, and I was, hanging with Julie, hanging with Sam,
right.
Hanging with, the best players in the world and doing very well when I would play against them, play with them. And I knew I deserved to be on the roster. I knew I deserved to play, but that wasn't in the cards that year. And so I knew what made me, decide not to just step out then was because I knew I could. I could. And I was performing and I was doing what, I needed to do. It just wasn't the right fit in terms of the soccer side. Their midfield roster is literally stacked. Some of the best, the best in the league. And so I knew situationally it wasn't the right place for me. But
right.
everywhere else, it hit all the boxes, and I love all the people there. I love the city. I love, my host family, just everything about Chicago, minus, when reality hits and you see them playing and you're not, that's when it was really, really tough.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that, I think you talked about obviously self-confidence and the importance of that, and having the confidence in yourself to say, okay, despite what maybe others are saying or my environment, I can persevere and pursue something. And so also I think the idea about people is really important, and having the right people in your life and my life. And for those that don't know, me and Joanna met when I, was ending my career in Europe. I had moved to Raleigh, literally knew not a soul, maybe Alexis, but I don't even think she was there at the time.
Mm-mm.
And we met through Morgan Stern, shout out. But yeah, you were very inspirational to me because, I was done with soccer at that point. but I had known, obviously I have a lot of friends in Chicago. I'd known about your season. It wasn't like you were coming off this like rookie of the year season. You had gone through adversity. And I remember you'd meet up and around Raleigh, and you were always like putting in time to train and finding people to do pickup with. And, you know, again, we had talked about it, you had this opportunity to go to Orlando, but again, it's like college. They didn't say, Joanna, you come and here's a contract waiting and you're going to start and play. But obviously you had the confidence that if you were given the opportunity, you would take advantage of it, which kudos to you. You had a great year last year. And that speaks a lot to who you are. But I would love to hear a little bit too about, and for people that don't know you, I would say most people that have met you and don't know you personally, but even maybe do know you personally, would say that you're one of the more positive people that I've ever met. I think generally you're not rather negative. I think that's why you have such a presence, because you're always smiling and happy and fun to be around. And but as we know from what you've told in your story thus far, it's not always been easy, and I'm sure you haven't always been smiling. So, you know, now to talk about it, Joanna actually just retired from the NWSL, and you can talk about the reasons for why you did that. But I know it was a difficult decision for you, and I know there's still a lot of us that at times struggle with the acceptance of having that kind of move away from our identity and saying, okay, as much as it's okay to believe that you want to continue, it's okay to say, I'm done playing, and I have more worth in the world and who I am to be okay with that decision. So talk a little bit about, one, you're just like your positivity. I think generally that's a fair assessment of you, but also how you got to this decision and kind of what you've been working through to kind of come to an acceptance. It may have not come yet. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, wait, what was the first part? Oh, positivity. Yeah. So I would say going back, I kind of split my recovery into like my first recovery, my second recovery. And my first process, I know I touched on it, but it was just mentally, physically, I was just in a terrible place. And because I didn't accept it and I didn't, come to terms with it. And something my mom, bless her, I love her. She's a strong, strong woman.
Wendy,
and, yeah,
my girl.
She would always let me, obviously there's times to, be emotional. There's times to feel bad and have those feelings, because you have to have those in order to move on. But I was kind of sitting in those feelings. And, one day my mom finally was like, you've got to get, like, this is the reality. It's not changing. There are people out there who do not have legs. You have two perfectly healthy legs, and one is just repaired. Like, get up, stop moping, get on with it. And, for me, once the second one happened, my whole demeanor changed. My whole mindset changed. Everything changed. And I think it all stemmed from that kind of turnaround and accepting it and knowing that, I wouldn't be playing for a certain amount of time, and that was just the facts. And so how do I become positive in the little things that I'm doing? And, kind of transitioning once I started playing, and then once I kind of was in Chicago, and once I was in Orlando, I was just so happy to be playing, that like the positivity and the smiles and everything that is so genuine because of how grateful I was to be playing and how grateful I am and how much I love the sport just kind of like came through during those times, because it was taken away from me for 20, 21, 22 months. So just that pure joy of loving the game and being able to play it was that true positivity on the field.
So the positivity piece is, I think, again, you're really good at bringing up great points, but I think just mindset's so important. And I would agree, every time, you are so genuine, I think it's a really important thing to highlight, especially when you consider like where we are in the world right now.
Yeah.
I definitely think like you lost something, right? Like soccer was taken away from you without your control. And I think right now, right, like I can't even go to the grocery store. It's taken from me. I can't go to the gym. It's taken from me. And I think part of it's perspective and trying to sustain that. Again, like you're going to have moments, but
all of those kind of struggles and, it taken away is made. I'm not saying, this forced retirement was
We'll talk about that
been
actually,
easy.
because I don't think we got into your story a little bit with the retirement piece.
Last year, at the last like 4 games of the season, I was having like really, bad like groin pain, hip flexor, high hamstring, glute, and it was more than like the norm that I was feeling. And so I got married in November. The season ended in October, and I rested pretty much up to the wedding. And then, I started getting back into it. Thank you. Yeah, it was a third off. Yeah, and so, afterwards I started getting back into things, and I started like my back was kind of hurting, and then my hip would hurt and alternate, and then I finally got to a pretty healthy point. And then in late January, sprinting, I went to cut, and I felt my back just like, it was so painful. And I drove up to actually hang out with you guys in Charlottesville that weekend.
Back brace. I was like,
with my back brace, because I previously had a bulging disc when I was in high school. Nothing crazy. Went back in. Didn't have any nerve pain, just back pain, and then I was good to go. But it never, I rested a full week. I saw my chiropractor, and then I tested out, and I was still in so much pain. I was like, it's definitely a bulging disc. Like, I need an MRI, whatever. And I was just expecting to see a bulging disc. But on the MRI, it showed that my L4, L5 was super degenerative. So all the discs on the MRI were white, except this one, and it was very black. And yeah, so with a degenerative disc, it's never going to fully heal. I was also getting like nerve pain in my leg, in my left leg. I'm 24. I want to have a family. I want to be able to do things with my family. I want to have kids.
Right.
So just kind of, it took me honestly about 4 weeks to kind of come to terms with it. And, it was a really difficult decision. I prayed hard on it, and, I got some answers, and I finally kind of came, I was at peace with it. And, Mark and Carl, the coaches in Orlando, were absolutely just phenomenal. And I love them to death. And, the most, I guess, disappointing thing was I felt like I learned so much last year, and I was, getting my feet underneath me, and I was really figuring out the league. And I was so excited about this next season, like just so ready for it. So that made it really tough not being able to, learn more from Mark and learn more from him as a player, because I respect the hell out of him.
Yeah.
So that made it difficult. But the fact that it was an injury that like forced me to, give it up. I'm not saying that, I always ask, like, why so young? I could have been like 3 more years, but at some point I would have had to, given up soccer, playing it at least. And, my time was now, and my body just couldn't do it anymore. And it also, kind of not makes me feel better, but, once my back was kind of healed up, I started, running or attempting to run and do exercises, and my hip, still wasn't right. So I, was like, listen, I need an MRI on this thing. 2 weeks ago, got my MRI, and there's a pretty large tear in my hip labrum that I'll have to have surgery on. So, for me, my body
telling
can't, yeah, my body's telling me something, and I can't go on with it. I just physically can't. If I'm 24 and have 2 ACLs, a degenerative disc, 2 bulging discs, and now a hip labrum, at such a young age, I need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of people that are, in, transition, and for different reasons. I know for me, mine wasn't, necessarily due to injury. I think for me, I just started to lose a little bit of my passion for it. And that kind of right away, based on my personality, was like, if I'm not passionate about it, do something different. And even now, I've been about 2.5 years out, and I still think I'm trying to find my way, went back to school and things of that such. And, but I do think you're in this incredible time. And again, it's only been short, a few months, but, I think to end, maybe talking a little bit about, what this journey has been thus far in terms of this transition period. It's probably not been easy with the quarantine, stuff like that, but also maybe, given you some time. I think with anything you do, whether you play the violin or you play a sport or you do one thing for 20 years of your life and you've dedicated all this time and effort, and then one day, for whatever reason, you're either forced or you choose to transition, regardless of what the reasoning is, it's challenging. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. So what's kind of been that experience like, and kind of what have you at least started to try to put structure around it, like in terms of finding what is your next passion?
So for me, I've always, even when I was coming back from injuries and doing all those things, I always loved coaching. My cousin she played at Clemson. We're about 15 years apart. She played at Clemson, coached at Clemson, and coached at Alabama. So I'd run around with her recruiting trips when she'd come and watch the Castle Showcase. I'd, be a little sidekick. So I loved that aspect of the game, and I love development, and I love, when I do individual training sessions, I love training kids. I really get a lot of fulfillment out of that. And so right now, my husband, Parker, is in the military, went to West Point, and we are currently in Columbus, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta. He's at Fort Benning, but he also has a hip injury. So we don't really know how long we'll be here because he does have to get surgery. So we don't know if we'll be medically discharged, if, he'll stay in. We don't really know what's going on. So right now we're in limbo.
Right.
So we're just trying to figure that out. And, it's actually pretty funny. I ran into the Columbus State coach. He lives kind of near us we walk around this lake, and I ran into his daughter, and then I ran into him. And he was actually, he landed here about 15 years ago, but he was the head coach for the Carolina Courage when the Carolina Courage folded in the NWSL in WUSA. So he worked with the national team. He's well established as a coach, and his dad was in the military, and he ended up here because it was like the only thing open once, the league folded and the season was just about to start. And he took his job, and, I ran into him, and I've really enjoyed, talking. And I think I'm going to, help out with their program for as long, we don't know how long we'll be here. But for the time being, I kind of do a lot of side hustling. Probably do a little bit of that, a bit of individuals, working with Jordan Angeli in the ACL club, which is a phenomenal thing that needs to be, highlighted. And, I wrote some articles for soccer.com. So I'm just kind of dabbling in a lot and trying to find my passions outside of playing the game.
Yeah, I think patience is important for people to remember. My journey's been even longer out, and I still think I am experiencing the patient piece. And
yeah,
I think it's like anything. You can't expect to walk into something new and it be perfect. If it is, that's
exactly.
awesome, and kudos to you. But there's also that patient piece. And, I just want to say thank you. I think your story is incredible. Anyone who gets an honor to know you, I'm very blessed to have you as such a close friend.
And vice versa. You came you talk about how you came into your life, but you also came into in my life at a time that, I came off of Chicago, and I was in a huge transition. Even though I was still playing, I was in that transition of where am I going to go, what's going to happen. And, I think, we were put in each other's laps to kind of lean on at that point. And I'm so blessed to, have you as a friend and let you hear my story.
Yeah, I think
one and not bits. You always hear bits. You don't get the whole thing.
I think honestly, life, we all know this, especially right now, it's about uncertainty and just trying to stay the course. And I'm hoping to get more people on. I think women right now, there's so many athletes that are stars, that are the lowest on the totem pole, that just have incredible stories. So I'm hoping that somebody watches this and gets an opportunity to learn from it or relate to it in whatever sense. So thank you. And
thank you.
I appreciate it a lot. So
love you, Tina.
Love ya. Bye, girl.
Bye.